Hello and welcome to the 19th Scouching Report for the 2021 NHL Entry Draft. Today we are jumping into a familiar junior team in the NHL Draft landscape with the Chicago Steel, and we're taking a look at Matthew Coronato. I will admit that it took me quite a while to really come around on Matthew Coronato and really see him as a very high-end NHL draft pick in this year's draft. And it definitely took time for me to really appreciate exactly what he brings to the game at such a high level. At first, I wasn't really seeing a whole lot in the way of elite talent in a bunch of different areas. I felt that playing with two 2000-born USHL players on a powerhouse Chicago Steel team certainly inflated his production, and I do think to a certain extent that holds true. But as the months and games tracked went by, it was very clear that there is much more to Matthew Coronato than I expected at the beginning of the year. Coronato to me is the perfect example of a player that when you're watching him, you don't really notice him a ton until you do, and when you're paying attention, he's constantly involved in play, and at the end of the night, he's got a couple of points on the board. He may be 5'10", but he certainly doesn't play like it. This guy, I think, is one of the more fearless players in this year's NHL draft. He's an excellent resistor of pressure and constantly puts in the work necessary to maintain possession. That work rate also translates along the boards and it shows up often. He doesn't relinquish zone transitions without at least a fight, and he uses strong stick checks and strong body positioning to keep the play in the offensive zone as much as he can. And Matthew Coronato, with his complete sample, is one of just 5 players that have broken the illustrious 80% offensive control zone transition percentage mark. But the kicker is that per 60 minutes, Coronato had 84 offensive transitions per 60 minutes that he was involved in. And in that cohort of 80% plus efficiency players, he sat 14% ahead of number 2 in terms of the volume of offensive transitions where he was involved. And when looking at only entering the offensive zone with control, which is a very strong correlate to generating offense, only Scott Morrow and a Swedish junior player who may not even be drafted this year in Theo Jacobson did better at getting pucks into the offensive zone with control in terms of percentages. And of that 80% offensive controlled zone transition percentage group, his offensive threat of 22.59 put him second in that group, driven by a remarkable 11.95 dangerous shot attempts per 60 minutes. And in that cohort, he had the highest rate of high danger shot attempts per 60 minutes as well. So when it comes to players getting the puck out of the defensive zone, through the neutral zone, into the offensive zone, and trying to score the puck themselves with volume and efficiency, there aren't many players, if any, that I have tracked this season that are better than Coronato. And it kind of reminds me a little bit of the Ville Koivunen report in a way where he's not agile or extremely skilled or the most incredible skater I've ever seen in my life, but he drives such good results through resilience on the puck, awareness of his line mates, both passing and carrying pucks across the blue line with intelligence and creativity, and the sense to naturally find open space, use line mates effectively, find open space away from the puck, and just have no-nonsense approaches to the game of hockey in a multitude of different ways. And I think that it's probably enough to overcome the lack of real elite, flashy offensive talent for Coronato. He does have really slippery, practical skill that can play one-on-one really well against opponents, and he knows how to pull pucks once or twice to create new space for himself and create new rushing lanes that also helps drive that offensive efficiency. But the biggest thing that drives so many good results for Matthew Coronato, in my opinion, is that you can just tell how much he's putting in terms of work rate. And that especially was true more and more the more the year went on. He really seems to be one of the most resilient and hardworking players that I have tracked. While his positional awareness and general sense of space around the ice is really high-end and very clearly indicative through the video, I did find that his ability to corral and settle pucks was a little bit sketchy here and there. But I do think that's something that with the skill level he already kind of has with the puck on his stick, can be refined with his time at Harvard as he goes on in the next couple of seasons. And honestly, no matter which way I look at Matthew Coronato, I looked at him and thought there aren't that many real downsides to his game. There are some concerns and things that might need work, but in terms of real negative weaknesses, I didn't really find that many, especially when you look at his sample as it evolved over the course of the year. Nothing really seems to rattle him. He finds ways to maintain possession, creatively think about the game as it's going on around him, and adapting to pressure, finding new passing lanes, and completing pass attempts all over the ice. And a great way he does this is using his body really intelligently. He just spins off forecheckers, uses brute force to pry himself away from defenders, create new ice for himself, forehand pass, backhand pass to a line mate nearby, and just maintains possession here and there really, really well. As long as he's aware of his limits, I found him to be a rock-solid quarterback for a line. He makes no-nonsense plays all of the time, sensing open space in transition and making great give-and-go plays that just make everyone's life easier. And after he makes those passes, he also finds ways to quickly make himself a pass target further up in the neutral zone or into the offensive zone. And what else I picked up on is he has a natural tendency at both ends of the ice to be willing to go beneath the goal line and really grind out play as much as he can. And this pairs very well with his awareness, as he's able to fetch loose pucks or create loose pucks below the goal line, identify a target in front, and just ship that puck out as quickly as he can to the target in dangerous areas. So while he scored a lot of goals this year, I don't think his potential as a playmaker can really be overlooked. And I noticed over the course of the season that Coronato started playing center more and more, and I can definitely see why. His natural sense for the game and willingness to be involved both offensively and defensively checks off a lot of boxes for centers that I'm looking for. Again, he might not have that high-end speed and skill, but he brings a lot of other traits to the game that for a center you're really looking for, and for a guy who seems to be as aware of his limitations as he is, he's a guy that I think projects pretty well to be a center at the next level if you're willing to try. He looks like a very comfortable open ice player. He can deceive through the neutral zone, push and pull pace in that area of the ice as well, create unpredictable rush patterns that not only invite pressure, but with a quick skill move here and there, he can find a route around that neutral zone pressure, and just drive play up the ice with efficiency, control, and volume. And for centers, whether he does it with speed or skill or resilience on their feet, it doesn't really matter how they do it to me, but Coronato continued to just put results up constantly. And the really nice thing about this is that some people might hear what I'm saying about him and say, well, he just holds onto the puck all the time and he just hot dogs the puck around the ice trying to bite off more than he can chew, like some players we've profiled. But in most situations and in most games, it really felt that Coronato knew when to push and pull the flow of the game on his own, when to pass pucks to line mates and when not to, when to take risks and when not to. It wasn't perfect, but it did feel very well refined. I found that he did skate himself into a lot of pressure early on in the season, but this was something that I felt went away more and more. And especially towards the end of the season, I saw a lot of improvements when it comes to driving power on his edges and through his turns. He's got strong skill and strong footwork to find open lanes and continue surveying the ice in creative ways. And I think it showed really interesting and promising signs for his offensive play and offensive vision as a playmaker. If he can continue to be more mobile in the offensive zone, creative on his edges, opening up his feet, and willing to use more of the offensive zone to survey the ice, yeah, he's a great goal scorer, but there's playmaking there as well. And on that goal scoring note, Coronato is a guy who had 57 goals in 59 games this season. And you don't score that many goals by doing nothing. And in my viewings, it came from resilience and his ability to just bulldoze through defensemen. He just keeps his feet moving all of the time, which is something a lot of coaches are always looking for. He just gets himself in position to get something off, and usually it worked out in his favor based on strong shooting mechanics and being able to put a lot of weight behind those shots really quickly, even if he's under pressure. He just doesn't give up and takes every chance he gets, and he drives a lot of dangerous shot attempts from dangerous areas. And the reason they're called dangerous is because they go in the net a lot. So somehow with that equation, you end up with a player who has 57 goals in 59 games in junior hockey. But outside of resilience and plain old hard work in the offensive zone, Coronato without the puck certainly knows how to find open space and make himself a one-time target, and he certainly had his fair share of one-timer goals this season as well. I do question his ability to consistently find open space on NHL ice, for example, without improvements to his strength, improvements to his quickness on his feet, and just an increase in the pace at which he tries to find that open space. But that's something that I think you can learn over time in the NCAA and in the NHL one day. But even if it doesn't come as far as it could, he still has a lot in his offensive toolkit that could project to him being a really good goal scorer. And his mechanics for actually shooting the puck seem very sound. He's got toes pointed towards the net before the puck hits him. He loads up his hip really well and transmits that force through his shoulders to just plow the puck into the net. But I think some skills training might be necessary for Coronato if he is going to become a premier multiple situation NHL goal scorer, especially at 5-on-5. Players who like to fool goalies with their hands, I don't really think that Coronato is quite there yet. His hands are practical, efficient, useful in offensive rush scenarios, but I didn't really see his deking ability on goaltenders being really high enough to really fool NHL level talent right now. But again, we're talking about a junior hockey player, and there's a few years to go before Coronato touches NHL ice, I think. So when I look at Coronato as a whole, as he is right now, I think his overall ceiling as an NHL player might be a little bit limited, but the combination of smarts, resiliency, off-puck offense, practical efficiency in multiple areas of the ice, and a really remarkable work rate all lead me to believe that that is a significant starting point for fundamentals that can be kind of hard to coach into young players. I think at the very least he could be useful in a variety of roles on an NHL team with a lot of headroom to develop his offensive toolkit. So what's the best part of Matthew Coronato's game? Honestly, his feel for the game and the way he approaches it mentally is really impressive and mature, I think. Being able to overcome potential limitations when it comes to blazing speed or ridiculous skill at the junior level is something that I don't see a whole lot of in young players, but Matthew Coronato certainly shows it. He's very intelligent, and he uses his intelligence combined with his solid fundamentals to just be all around efficient at the game. He generates results through hard work, but even in open ice with the puck on his own stick, it's not like he's just moving his feet to bulldoze through guys. He can deceive in the neutral zone, evade pressure, go one-on-one with guys and work his way through it, and he also knows when to work off of line mates and send passes around the ice. This is a very well-rounded and intelligent player that has a really impressive and endearing approach to the game that I've really enjoyed. And his production seems to really come from just getting to the next phase of an offensive possession somehow. It didn't matter how, it just had to get there, and with him it usually did. And on that note, that leads me to the good part. Matthew Coronato is a bit undersized, but he certainly does not play that way. He does not back down from pressure. He keeps his feet moving a lot. And when combining that with his positional awareness of opponent passing lanes and ability to step in on loose pucks, and his awareness for line mates around the ice, I think there's plenty of tools to become an extremely versatile NHL player down the road, regardless of his height. And yes, at times he can overhandle pucks and hold onto them for too long, skate himself into pressure thinking he can fight through it a little bit more often than he could, but he shows a resilience where if he spends some time in the gym over the next few years bulking up, I think that could do him extremely well as a resilient, if undersized player in the NHL. So I'm hopeful that coaches see it the same way and don't just set him aside because he's 5'10" and thinks he can play center. I do think this is a 5'10" center that can play and come off as looking a lot bigger than 5'10". The not so good part is another one of these nebulous ones. I don't think there's necessarily a weakness in his game as it is right now in terms of a true weakness. There are other traits that make up for a lack of real elite size and skill and speed, but to me the big question will be how is the combination of traits as he is now relative to the sheer amount of points he put up this season translate once he's up against faster, bigger, and stronger competition in the NHL. I do think he'll be an NHL player, but his overall impact offensively might be a little bit limited if he doesn't continue to build on his strength, build on his skill, and build on his speed generation. But if his time at Harvard improves those fundamentals, he can get a bit quicker with his skill and his feet, settle pucks more consistently, and maintain control of pucks more consistently. I honestly think this guy could be a heck of a Swiss Army knife in a variety of roles in an NHL system. And while this is a player that from time to time can keep things simple and effective, there were times where he was trying to put the game on his back when he just didn't really have a hope of getting through that situation. It just wasn't always the right play. He could look off line mates, skate directly into pressure, and just make life more difficult for himself than it needed to be, but this did seem to dwindle a little bit as time went on and once he got more chances to play in big open ice down the middle. And with Coronato, I did feel that his speed did hold him back from being as effective defensively as he could be. And while he had the sense to cover open ice and cover passing lanes and quickly step into them to cause turnovers, I do think that indicates a lack of projectable pace and speed that might hold him back from a real high-end NHL top 6 job as a center scoring points for an NHL team. So Matthew Coronato scored a ton of goals and scored a ton of points. Is he going to do that in the NHL? I'm not sure. Is Matthew Coronato going to completely transform your NHL franchise and be a huge mid-round steal? Probably not either. He just strikes me as a player who brings those vibes of knows how to play the game of hockey, where he just makes up for a lack of truly elite fundamentals in some areas with a really high-end brain for the game, team unit play as a center and quarterbacking a line, and a confidence that just comes through the tape at you. And on top of all of that, he has a natural resilience under pressure that I just love to see, especially in undersized players. Under pressure, he keeps his feet moving, tries to escape that pressure somehow, and if that fails, he tries to make a play one way or the other, and he gets rewarded for it. So assuming his next few years involve building on his agility, building on his skill, especially when it comes to settling pucks, which I did see was a bit of an issue, and utilizing all of these things together to evade defenders more consistently without having to physically fight them off all the time, I think there is a very interesting ceiling here for Matthew Coronato that could really outperform his draft slot. But if all else fails, I certainly think that Matthew Coronato could fit in the middle of the lineup, whether at center or the wing, being one of these guys who might not score a tremendous amount of points, but when the playoffs come, everybody realizes the value he brings to the ice. And I think that there's power play upside whether you put him in the bumper slot to be a one-time option or a real interesting one-time and playmaking option off the boards while still driving good 5-on-5 results. I think there's a lot of interesting options for Matthew Coronato's career in the NHL one day, and that on its own to me is quite exciting. So while his confidence might get him into trouble from time to time and his fundamentals might not be as strong as some other guys in this range, players don't generate the kinds of results both offensively and defensively that Coronato put up without doing something right. And Coronato brings the work rate, the intensity, the resilience, and the finishing ability to make it all work somehow. And again, he's one of these players that I think almost any NHL team would be happy to add to their pipeline, even if they don't think he's going to be a massive, game-changing asset for their team. I do think he will be a good one that a lot of teams wish they had. So that's all for this Scouching Report. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, you can click all the buttons you see below me so you never miss another one. If you really liked it, you could subscribe on Patreon or click join below to join our YouTube membership program. You'll get early access to videos, credits at the end of every video, access to a Discord server, data sheets for hundreds of drafted and undrafted prospects, exclusive written reports, and plenty of other goodies, or you can pick up some merchandise at the Scouchwear shop, where 50% of all profits go to the Women's Sports Foundation. So that's all, and we will see you in the next one, where we start the final 3 reports of the 2021 draft, so look forward to those.